tears and tributes. The emotional goodbye to YuMenglong, Wang Yibo Xiao Zhan attends. It began beneath a gray sky that seemed to carry the weight of 1,000 memories. The wind moved gently through the tall trees outside the memorial hall, whispering the name that had once filled stages, scripts, and screens, YuMenglong. He was more than an actor. He was a rhythm that lived between light and emotion. His voice had painted the silence of dramas. His smile had melted the camera's cold lens. But today, that smile lived only in photographs lined along the marble aisle, flickering beneath the trembling flame of candles. The news of his passing had arrived like lightning, swift, impossible, cruel. And when the world learned that Wang Yibo and Xiao Zhan would both attend his farewell, the internet froze again, hearts colliding between shock and sorrow. The hall was a sea of white lilies. Their scent carried both peace and pain. Every petal looked like a memory that refused to fade. Wang Yibo arrived first, dressed in black, his face hidden behind dark glasses that couldn't conceal the red at the edges of his eyes. His usual calm seemed softer, his steps slower. The cameras flashed, but he didn't look up once. Every click felt intrusive, yet he kept walking, a man steady but breaking inside. Behind him, minutes later, came Xiao Zhan. The same composure, the same silence, the same weight in his eyes. The crowd outside parted instinctively, as though the wind itself cleared a path for him. No words passed between the two men at first, yet the air seemed to tremble with recognition, the kind that doesn't need language. Inside the hall, the music was soft, a slow instrumental version of YuMenglong's most beloved song. Every note felt like a heartbeat fading into distance. People whispered, cried, bowed. But when Yibo approached the framed portrait, something in the atmosphere shifted. He removed his cap, placed a single lily at the foot of the stand, and stood still, not for seconds, but for long, aching minutes. No movement, no sound, just breath against silence. Then, quietly, Xiao Zhan stepped forward. He placed his hand on Yibo's shoulder, and the gesture, captured in a single frame, became the photograph that defined the day. Two men who had conquered screens now stood conquered by grief. It wasn't performance. It was truth stripped bare. The memorial screens played clips from YuMenglong's work, scenes where he had laughed, cried, sung under neon rain. The audience broke down when the final clip played, you smiling directly into the camera and saying, "If tomorrow never comes, remember the songs we shared." The hall became a river of tears. Yibo's head lowered, his shoulders shook. Xiao Zhan, standing beside him, reached for a tissue, but instead of handing it over, he simply placed it on the table, letting it speak for him. Outside, fans gathered in silence, holding candles that flickered like stars trying not to die. Social media drowned in tributes. Every platform echoed the same phrase, "Legends don't die, they echo." But there was more beneath the calm surface. Those who had worked close to the trio, YuMenglong, Wang Yibo, and Xiao Zhan, knew their connection ran deep. You had been a bridge, the quiet soul who brought peace when the world around them roared too loud. He had once said in an interview, "If Yibo is speed and Xiao Zhan is heart, then I'm the silence that connects them." And now that silence had turned eternal. The footage from inside the ceremony later showed something the crowd outside couldn't see. When the final tribute video ended, the lights dimmed, and a single spotlight fell on the center stage. A violinist began to play, slowly, mournfully. Then, from the far corner, a voice rose. It wasn't planned. It wasn't rehearsed. It was Yibo. Softly, trembling, almost whispering the words of one of Yu's songs, the one they had performed together years ago on a variety show. The melody was shaky but pure. Xiao Zhan closed his eyes. He joined in, almost instinctively, their voices blending like two fading echoes of a friend they would never see again. The audience couldn't hold it. The hall turned into one massive heartbeat of sobs and silence. It wasn't music anymore. It was farewell. Reporters later wrote that moment into history, the duet that broke a nation's heart. But those who were there said it wasn't about fame or performance. It was about friendship, raw, human, infinite. When the final note ended, the violinist lowered his bow, and all that remained was the sound of rain outside. The sky itself seemed to cry that afternoon. The casket was carried out slowly, draped in white cloth, followed by a long trail of flowers and letters. Yibo and Xiao Zhan walked behind it, heads bowed, hands clasped together in silent prayer. At the steps outside, the crowd erupted into quiet chants of YuMenglong's name, hundreds of voices trembling through the storm. The two men paused before the hearse. Yibo reached out, touched the casket lightly, and whispered something the microphones didn't catch. But the camera caught the shape of his lips. "Thank you for keeping us together." Xiao Zhan nodded beside him, his jaw tight, his eyes glassed with unshed tears. That moment went viral instantly. Fans called it the promise of three. Even in loss, it reminded everyone of the invisible thread that bound them. Three souls who had shared screens, secrets, and silent strength in a world that often forgot how to be gentle. As the hearse rolled away, petals fell from the crowd like snow. The sound of the engine faded into distance, leaving behind only the soft rustle of umbrellas and the lingering scent of lilies. But the story didn't end there. Later that evening, a private vigil was held on the rooftop of a quiet hotel overlooking the city lights. Only a few close friends attended. Among them, Yibo and Xiao Zhan sat side by side, staring into the horizon that glowed faintly with the colors of twilight. They didn't speak much. They didn't need to. Some said they played one of Yu's unreleased demos on a phone, letting his voice drift through the wind. Others said they made a quiet promise to live more fiercely, to create with more heart, to carry his name through every melody and memory that would follow. The stars came out slowly, as if listening. Somewhere below, fans still waited outside the hall, lighting candles in formation that spelled out three names: Yibo, Xiao Zhan, Menglong. It wasn't a fandom moment. It was a farewell written in flame. The next day, the world awoke to a photo that broke the internet. Yibo and Xiao Zhan standing together by Yu's portrait, each holding a single candle. Their faces reflected in the glass, tired, pale, but filled with peace. The caption beneath, posted by the official studio account, read simply, "For the light that taught us how to shine." That line became eternal. It echoed through timelines, through hearts, through every fan who had loved them all. And as days turned to weeks, tributes poured in. Art, music, letters, documentaries. People didn't just mourn YuMenglong, they celebrated the love he had left behind, the unity his absence had rebuilt. For Yibo, the next time he performed on stage, he wore a small silver pin shaped like a musical note, the same one Yu had once gifted him during filming. For Xiao Zhan, his next project included a dedication line in the credits, "For the friend who reminded us to smile on rainy days." The world noticed. The internet wept again. Because this wasn't just celebrity mourning, it was humanity unfolding. Tears had turned to tribute. Grief had turned to grace. And somewhere, beyond the clouds, YuMenglong's voice still sang. Not through speakers or screens, but through every person who refused to let his memory fade. They said legends live forever. But this time, the legend lived not in fame, but in friendship. Wang Yibo's calm resilience, Xiao Zhan's quiet strength, both stood as mirrors reflecting the man they had lost. And together, they taught the world something only pain can teach, that even when a chapter ends, the story doesn't die. It becomes music in another key. As night returned and the city dimmed, the wind carried faint notes of the song they'd sung at the memorial. The same song YuMenglong had once ended a concert with. And in that unseen harmony, between rain, loss, and memory, his spirit seemed to linger, smiling, whispering, "Don't cry because it's over, sing because we were here." And they did. And we all did. Because goodbyes may close the eyes, but never the heart. And in that truth, under the soft fall of twilight, the emotional goodbye became an eternal beginning. Tears and tributes. The day the world stood still, the morning began heavy, as if the clouds themselves refused to rise. Long before dawn, people were already lining the avenue that led to the memorial hall. Cameras blinked like distant stars. Umbrellas bloomed black beneath a drizzle that smelled of incense and sorrow. Every whisper carried the same name, YuMenglong. Inside, the hall gleamed with white silk banners. On each was written a line from his favorite poem. Even when light fades, melody remains. The air trembled with the hush that precedes a storm of feeling. Then, just past 9, the doors opened. Wang Yibo stepped through first, silent as the rain. He wore no jewelry, no emblem. Only a black ribbon tied around his wrist, a simple mark of grief. Reporters called his name, but he didn't lift his head. His steps echoed like slow percussion, matching the rhythm of the funeral drums outside. Moments later came Xiao Zhan, equally composed, equally fragile. He paused at the entrance, his breath visible in the cold air, his eyes locked on the portrait ahead, Yu's calm smile forever frozen in light. For a second, he seemed to lose balance, as if time had slipped from under him. But Yibo turned, met his gaze, and together they walked forward, shoulder to shoulder, into the silence that waited. The scene felt like cinema carved from reality. Every movement carried weight. Every glance, a hidden dialogue of pain and respect. When they reached the altar, the music began, a single piano note held so long it almost broke. The screen behind them flickered to life, showing clips of Yu laughing between takes, strumming his guitar in rehearsals, scolding the crew for skipping meals. Laughter rippled through tears, love softened loss. Then the song changed, one he'd written but never released. His voice poured through the speakers, raw and unpolished. "If you find me in a dream, don't wake me up too soon." The crowd broke. Dozens of fans pressed their hands to their mouths. Directors, co-stars, producers all bowed their heads. Yibo stepped closer to the casket. He reached out, fingertips grazing the polished wood as though memorizing its temperature. For a long moment, he stood motionless, and then he whispered, barely audible even to the front row, "We still hear you." Xiao Zhan followed. He laid a white lily beside Yibo's and placed a folded piece of paper on top. Later, someone would say it was a lyric sheet, Yu's handwriting on one side, Xiao Zhan's on the other, the last song they had promised to finish together. A faint breeze slipped through the open doors, flickering every candle at once. The flames wavered, then steadied, as if the room itself was breathing. Behind them, a choir of students from Yu's old academy began to sing. Their harmonies floated upward, wrapping around the chandeliers like invisible ribbons. And in that moment, something unspoken passed between the two men, an understanding that grief could be both anchor and wings. When the ceremony paused for reflection, Yibo walked to a corner of the hall where a wall of messages had been set up, hundreds of notes from fans, each pinned like a paper petal. He read a few quietly, one that said, "You taught us that silence can sing." He smiled, the smallest, saddest smile, and tucked the note into his pocket. Outside, the rain thickened, turning the marble steps into mirrors. Dozens of umbrellas crowded together as the coffin was carried out. Xiao Zhan held the edge of the flag draped across it. Yibo followed directly behind, his gaze fixed on the horizon. Not once did they wipe their tears, they let them fall freely, joining the rain. The hearse doors closed with a muted click that echoed like the closing of a chapter. Yet the crowd didn't disperse. They stayed, humming Yu's song under their breath. Some lifted phones, not to record but to light the way, screens glowing like constellations in morning. At that instant, a beam of sunlight tore through the clouds, striking the hall's glass roof. It refracted into hundreds of colors that spilled over the mourners. The cameras captured the prism shining across Yibo's and Xiao Zhan's faces, one ray of warmth in a day of gray. Fans later called it Yu's last performance, light directing itself. When the cars finally moved, Xiao Zhan turned to Yibo and said softly, "He would have laughed at us crying like this." Yibo nodded, voice barely a murmur. "Then let's make him proud instead." Neither knew a nearby reporter's microphone had caught the exchange. Within hours, the clip flooded the internet. People replayed it, not for gossip but because it sounded like healing. Back inside, the empty halls still carried their footsteps. Candles burned low, petals wilted, but the atmosphere pulsed with something larger than grief: reverence. Later, as evening fell, fans gathered again outside, placing photos of all three men side by side on the steps. Someone began to sing the chorus of Yu's old drama theme. Soon hundreds joined, their voices echoing through the streets. From a high window in a nearby car, Yibo and Xiao Zhan watched quietly before driving away. Neither spoke. The sound of that chorus followed them into the night, imperfect, off-key, beautiful. The following morning, a photograph emerged online: two white lilies lying on YuMenglong's gravestone, arranged in the shape of wings. No one saw who left them, but the handwriting on the accompanying note read, "Fly easy, brother. We'll keep the music alive."
No signature.
None was needed. And so the world understood that farewells are never final. They are echoes stretching into tomorrow. YuMenglong's light may have faded from the stage, but it burned brighter in every act of love that day, in Yibo's trembling hands, in Xiao Zhan's silent vow, in the fans who refused to let the rain end the song. The footage of the ceremony would later play on national television, not as celebrity news, but as tribute to artistry, loyalty, and the way human hearts hold each other through loss. Narrators spoke of brotherhood beyond applause. Viewers wept in living rooms across the country. And when the screen finally faded to black, one message appeared in white letters, a quote from Yu himself: "Don't grieve too long. Every tear you shed becomes a note in my next song." That line summed up the day. Tears were notes, tributes were harmony, and friendship was the melody that refused to die. Even now, when the wind moves through the city at night, people say it carries a faint refrain, a tune half remembered, half eternal, the sound of three friends still singing together somewhere beyond the rain.